Why you chase what's not chasing you? Why do we give so much to people who give us so little? Have you ever asked yourself why you keep reaching out to someone who never really reaches back? Why your mind loops around every unread message, every unanswered call, every breadcrumb of attention, like it means something? You think it's love, you think it's hope, but often it's an unconscious survival pattern dressed up as loyalty. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is where it begins, not in the heartbreak, not in the silence they leave you with, but in the silence that's existed inside you for years, the one you tried to fill by chasing someone who never truly saw you. Because when love was inconsistent in your early life, you learned to chase emotional crumbs. You learned to work harder for affection, to see absence as a challenge, to interpret rejection as a riddle worth solving. This isn't weakness, it's wounding. And the wound says, if I can just make them choose me, I'll finally feel like I'm enough. You're not chasing love, you're chasing validation. When a person shows you hot and cold behavior, your nervous system doesn't know how to relax. It becomes addicted to the cycle of approval, withdrawal, confusion, hope. It feels like chemistry, but it's actually chaos. And chaos, for some of us, is the only thing that ever felt familiar. Because, if we're honest, you didn't chase them because they were so amazing. You chased them because they reminded you, on some deep, invisible level, of a wound you've never quite healed. The one that says, I have to prove I'm lovable. I have to earn their attention. I have to stay even when it hurts, otherwise I'll be abandoned again. This is what Jung would call a shadow pattern, a piece of your psyche that you don't consciously see, but which pulls the strings behind your emotions and choices. The shadow is everything about ourselves we do not know or refuse to know. And chasing people who won't choose you, that's often your shadow's way of trying to resolve an old story, to get the love you never got, but from the same kind of person who never gave it. It's not just repetition, it's reenactment, and it's exhausting. We don't just fall in love with people, we fall in love with the chance to heal something through them. And that's what makes the chase so addictive. You think, if they finally choose me, I'll finally be okay. But here's the truth. Even if they do choose you, even if they text you back, even if they give you what you've been waiting for, it won't last. Because it was never about them. It was about the void inside you that thought their validation could fill it. So the more you chase, the more you lose yourself. You mold your personality to avoid scaring them away. You silence your needs so they won't pull back again. You wait by the phone. You overthink every word. You edit your messages like your worth depends on their reply. And what does it give you? More silence, more uncertainty, more confusion masked as chemistry. You're not confused, you're being emotionally starved. It's not your fault you learned this, but it is your responsibility to see it, to bring that unconscious pattern into the light. And Carl Jung would tell you, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. But here's the beautiful part. Once you see the pattern, you don't have to be ruled by it. Once you recognize the wound, you can stop chasing those who mirror it. And that's when the healing begins. You weren't meant to beg for love. You weren't built to break yourself just to hold someone else's attention. You were meant to be seen, held, and chosen effortlessly, freely, fully. But for that to happen, you have to stop running toward what's running from you. You have to stop assuming the problem is you, because it never was. Stop chasing. Start remembering who you are. The psychology of pulling back. What if your silence is louder than anything you've ever said? There's a sacred moment in healing when instead of explaining, instead of chasing, instead of proving your worth to someone who keeps missing it, you pull back, not to punish, not to provoke, but because you finally realized your energy is too precious to waste on someone who only values it when it's gone. Pulling back isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because every time you pour your heart into someone who gives you uncertainty in return, you tell your subconscious that love is conditional. You reinforce the lie that love is a performance, a job to chase, a constant proving ground. But when you stop, when you finally sit in the stillness of your own presence, everything changes. Not because they change, but because you do. Carl Jung taught that individuation, becoming whole, happens when we stop projecting our worth onto others and begin integrating our fragmented self. Pulling back is the first step toward that wholeness. It's the moment you stop asking, "Do they want me?" and start asking, "Why do I keep needing people who don't show up?" What you stop chasing starts revealing itself for what it really is. Psychologically, detachment works not because it's a tactic, but because it breaks the cycle. In toxic dynamics, your chasing feeds their distance. It gives them power. It affirms their role as the one being pursued. But when you pull back, you reverse the narrative. Suddenly, they're no longer the prize. Suddenly, you're no longer predictable. Suddenly, their silence isn't in control anymore, because you're not waiting for it. That absence they once weaponized, you've disarmed it by no longer needing a reply. And whether they notice or not, whether they come back or disappear, you win because you reclaimed your power. But let's be clear, pulling back isn't manipulation. It's not a test or a game. It's a return to yourself, to your center, to the version of you that existed before you handed your peace over to someone else's approval. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung, pulling back is how you stop dreaming that someone else will save you and start awakening to the fact that you were never lost to begin with. You just forgot how much power you had when you weren't shrinking for someone to love you. Silence isn't passive, it's powerful. Pause. And the people who once took you for granted, they might notice, they might not, but that's no longer your measure of value. Your detachment will trigger those who were only invested in your chase because they weren't really loving you. They were loving your need for them. So, when you pull back, they may call you distant. They may say you changed. But really, you woke up. You saw the truth. You stepped away from the loop. You stopped calling confusion love. Pulling back doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about yourself to stop begging for breadcrumbs when you deserve the feast. And that's when something miraculous happens. Peace. No more checking your phone obsessively. No more replaying every conversation. No more needing someone else to validate what your intuition already told you. Pulling back is how you stop losing yourself for the sake of being chosen. It's how you stop seeking someone else's yes as permission to feel whole. You weren't too much. You were just too available to someone who wasn't ready. Carl Jung believed the unconscious must be brought to light. And every time you choose yourself, when you stop explaining, stop proving, stop fixing, you bring light to the part of you that never got to rest. You begin healing not through their return, but through your release. What happens to them when you stop trying? The moment you stop chasing, they start noticing. You've been the one who always reached out, the one who cared louder, loved harder, gave more. And for a while, it felt like the only way to keep the connection alive. But something happens when you stop, when the texts stop coming, when your energy stops flowing toward them like a river they never bothered to swim in, when your presence, once constant, becomes a silence they didn't expect. At first, they may not notice, because they were used to your effort. They grew comfortable in the chase being one-sided. But slowly, it starts to dawn on them that your laughter isn't echoing in their inbox, that your name isn't lighting up their notifications, that the attention they took for granted has gone quiet. And now, there's a gap, a space, a void, one they thought they wanted, until they felt it. The absence they once ignored starts to feel loud. Carl Jung wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And here's the truth. Your silence isn't just about you. It becomes a mirror that forces them to sit with the very thing your attention distracted them from, themselves. When you were constantly chasing, they could hide behind avoidance, behind half-effort, behind the illusion that they were in control. But when you stop, the illusion shatters. They begin to wonder, why haven't they messaged me? Did they finally move on? Were they really that serious? And I just missed it. Now the overthinking is theirs. The tension is in their chest. The silence is their discomfort. And it's not manipulation, it's consequence. Because for the first time, they're not being fed, not being pursued, not being emotionally upheld by someone else's need to be needed. And in that stillness, something else awakens. Regret? Maybe not deep, lifelong regret, but a sting, a realization that the thing they assumed would always be there isn't. And sometimes, it's only in your absence that they recognize the depth of your presence. They miss you, but they may never admit it. Here's the complicated truth though. Some will reach out, but not because they've changed, because they miss the supply, the comfort, the emotional labor you carried for them. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake their reappearance for transformation. But Jung would urge you to ask, is this shadow or is this growth? Because what looks like love might just be fear of losing control. They may chase you, but not for you. They may want your attention, but not your heart. They may want your comfort, but not your commitment. So, if and when they come back, watch what they do, not just what they say. Jung said, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And if they don't come back, let it stand as proof that your presence meant nothing more to them than convenience. Either way, you win, because you learned that your value was never meant to be proved through pursuit. What happens to them when you stop trying? The mask slips, the control breaks, the illusion dissolves, and for the first time, they're left to face the emptiness they once filled with your overgiving. That's not revenge, that's reality, because when someone depends on your effort but doesn't return it, they're not in love with you. They're in love with how you make them feel. And when you pull that away, they're forced to reckon with their own emotional vacancy. When you stop trying, the truth shows up. Sometimes the truth is, they never cared. Sometimes the truth is, they didn't know how. Sometimes the truth is, they did, but only when you were disappearing. And none of that is a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of how they process love, how they navigate intimacy, how they deal with presence and absence. So, don't get confused by the chase. Don't let their sudden interest rewrite the narrative. You didn't become more valuable when you pulled back. You just stopped making yourself invisible for someone who refused to see you. And that is when they finally noticed. You don't need them to chase you. You needed to return to you. You thought you were pulling back to get them, but you were really coming home to yourself. You didn't pull back to punish them. You didn't go silent to manipulate. And you weren't trying to teach them a lesson. You just got tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of reaching. Tired of wondering if you were too much or never enough. And in that tiredness, something sacred happened. You finally let go. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself more. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And sometimes, to become that person, you have to lose who you became, just to be loved by someone who couldn't meet you there. The moment you stop chasing them is the moment you start remembering you. You used to think their affection was the prize, that if they came back, if they finally saw your worth, everything would feel whole again. But what if the real prize was your peace, your clarity, your energy coming home to itself? What if the reason they felt like home was because you didn't know how to feel at home inside yourself yet? Healing doesn't always look like closure. Sometimes it looks like waking up one morning and realizing you didn't check your phone, you didn't think of them first, you didn't rehearse the last conversation one more time in your head. You just breathed, you just lived, you just remembered that your life was never meant to orbit around someone else's absence. They were a mirror. They showed you the places still aching, the gaps still hungry, the versions of you that still believed you had to earn love through sacrifice. But you know better now. You've seen what it costs to chase someone who isn't chasing you. You felt the slow unraveling of your self-esteem, thread by thread, in exchange for breadcrumbs. And now you choose peace, Now you choose stillness. Now you choose the kind of love that never makes you beg for it. Jung would call this individuation, the path back to wholeness, not found in someone else, but in reclaiming the pieces of you you gave away too easily. You realize now you weren't waiting for them. You were waiting for you. The you who sets boundaries. The you who trusts your intuition. The you who doesn't chase because you know you are worth being chosen. The right people will never need to be chased. And the moment you pulled back, you made space for them. Not the one who couldn't love you clearly, but the one who can. Who wants to. Not because you begged, but because you became whole without them. So, here's the truth. You never needed them to chase you. You never needed their validation to be whole. You needed clarity. You needed silence. You needed the ache of your own overgiving to finally become unbearable. So, you could break free. So, you could walk away not in anger, but in peace. So, you could finally hear your own voice again. So, you could return home to yourself. You are not hard to love. You were just loving people who made you feel like you were. And when you stop chasing, you start attracting what's meant. Not chaos, not confusion, not someone who leaves you guessing, but someone who sees you, chooses you, and walks beside you without needing to be convinced. That begins when you stop chasing what was never yours and start remembering what always was. If this message resonated with your journey, tap the like button to affirm your healing. Share this video with someone you know is still chasing clarity in someone else's silence. And subscribe for more truth-centered reflections rooted in Jungian psychology, trauma healing, and emotional awakening. Let's create a world where we stop chasing and start choosing ourselves.